Hello, and welcome to the Spiritual Speakeasy, where the bar is always open and the spirits are all served. Tonight's guest is Logan Boas. He is a TTRPG writer and cultural consultant, as well as a co owner and representative for a cosmetic company. And let's bring him on and let's talk to Logan.
Hello, Julie. How are you?
I am well. How about yourself?
Very tired, but glad to be here.
Logan has just come in from two different weekend fairs or markets or however you want to call them. I call them gigs, weekend gigs. And so I caught him and was able to make a contact, and it's kind of like, oh, he's exhausted, but he's on, he's here. Tell us about your TTRPG and what you do. What you do about?
Well, I'm a TTRPG writer. I don't currently have one published myself. I do a lot of work for a bunch of other companies. I've been published. I do a lot of work with Coyote and Crow specifically. They are a Native American role-playing game in that they were made by a team of natives. It takes place in a setting where America was never colonized. The disaster that struck was ecological in 1402 rather than social. And it's a game about surviving in a world that's much different, much harsher, and most of the pressures are very different than what we have here. I also work with a bunch of different companies as a writer. I've worked as an editor, I've worked as a graphic designer, and I've worked as, more often than not, a cultural consultant. In that I am Native myself, and one of the interesting things about life in the modern day is until about 7-ish years ago, it was still completely acceptable to make fun of Native Americans. And you can still find that in a lot of places. One of the main areas that you can see this is in like our media, because one of the most acceptable target of stereotypes is still Native and Indigenous people. And when you have that as a accepted thing, that can translate very quickly and very easily into much more serious issues. One of the most obvious is that it's acceptable to make fun of natives, and you don't have to look beyond the rising number of missing and murdered Indigenous people to see the end point. Well, or at least the interpersonal endpoint. There's a much more depressing one that I don't really want to talk about right now, but
Mhm.
you know. But the way I see it is I'm a very loud person. I've got a very big personality, and I have the ability to write. So I kind of figure it's incumbent on me to use that as best I can to rewrite some of the stereotypes. Um, I'm not perfect. I get it wrong, but the way I see it is I care enough to be there and try. And that's the most I can do. So, yeah.
Well, that's what I noticed about you when I met you in Kansas City at Crypticon was your very outgoing forward personality where you're not afraid to meet and greet and you're not afraid to talk to people and tell them, what you're about. And that kind of was an attraction for me to meet you because I love outgoing people. I'm outgoing and I use my voice to try to bring people together and understand too. Um, so I think that was what I was drawn to. You. We have a lot of people popping up saying hi to everybody. Hi, thank you for joining us. When when you're writing or assisting in these publications and these RPG games, you're able to get your cultural points across or inform people about the real history and what's really going on, the trends, the
Generally speaking, I like I said, I do my best in that there's a lot that's just been lost, and uh, one of the things that gets one of the phrases that gets used to communicate this is genocide is complicated, and yeah.
mm,
Um, Also, I grew up not as connected to my culture as other people did, so it's still something where I'm going through reconnection, and sometimes I honestly feel like I'm not the best person that could be doing it. And when I find that, I try to find someone better. And if I can't, then I will do it because I figure I'm better than other people because at least I know I'm not the best option. So self awareness, I think, is very important. And generally speaking, I'm able to get things across. And true history is a little more complicated, but uh, modern native perspective on the culture is a better way of phrasing it, I think. Just
okay.
uh, I do have family stories and that sort of oral history, but uh, you know, um, the most we all understand is that history books are written by the winners, and uh, yeah, in this case, um, it's a situation where I have to do my best. That's really what it boils down to.
Well, I mean, and it sounds to me like even though you say you're not the best person for this sometimes and that you're not as connected as you should be, you're connected enough to have the passion and the ability to communicate and to connect with that particular culture that is yours and you own it or you wouldn't be connecting to it as a person and trying to re-educate and reconnect.
Well, that's why I say, like I said, self awareness is key, and I figure the ability to say, recognize, and understand that to understand my place as it um, is better than other people. It's better than if I'm not there. So if I can't find somebody who I think is a better fit because they're more tribally connected, they're more culturally connected, they're more present in the right circles, or even just they have a uh, the appropriate tribal descendancy. Um, I figure if I can't do that, then yeah, I'm better than no one. So.
Well, I think any voice that represents in a positive fashion and enlightens and educates is better than no voice at all.
And I know that I'm going to do my best, and failing that, I'm also willing to take criticism. So um like, no, my inbox has had some very interesting things involved, not typically about native stuff, but yeah, um but that is a lot of the work I do with TTRPGs is just um be present and do my best. Generally speaking, my experiences have been very positive. Um, in that my suggestions are usually listened to. Um, and that's not always the case. Um, you can definitely, if you go up to any indigenous person in any part of like the entertainment industry, whether that's film, television, the TTRPG industry, anything that has native characters involved and an indigenous consultant, you're going to hear stories about an experience I call being used as a big red shield. Um, which is, oh, you can't complain, we have a native. And it's like, yeah, I tried, but you didn't listen. um and
And that's
oh,
sad.
oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
that's really sad because you'd think we've progressed enough, but we really haven't. I mean, the facade is there that we've progressed enough, but really we have not progressed nearly as far as we should have.
Exactly. Like a big thing about this is um kind of just the omnipresence of certain phrases in the American lexicon. One of my favorites is, oh, it's just a little powwow. Um, I
Ooh,
remember exactly. My daughter's principal, when I was still living in California, came up and said, "Oh, we have to have a meeting, lady, but don't worry, it's just a little powwow." At which point I looked at him, I gave him my
ooh.
best indigenous stare, and I said, "Oh, really? I don't think I brought my regalia." At which point it took him a second, and then the dots connected, and his eyes got real big, and I laughed, and it was fine. But
And the
other things.
backstepping started.
Mhm. Like you can't see it, but I'm not like a big person. I'm 5'6" at most. So it's not the weight of my physical presence that made him take the step back. More just the deadpan expression and let's call it the weight of social expectations. And like you see that in a lot of the language, like too many chiefs, not enough Indians, low man on the totem pole, things like that. Just saying it's not the problem. Not, I mean, it doesn't help, but it's a case of the fact that it is so normalized and so infantilized is what causes the issue. It's indicative of a deeper uh, thing where, oh, native culture is just native culture isn't as valued or seen as true or real as certain other cultures. And you can see this all throughout media, um, especially with indigenous, uh, we're going to call them creatures. That's not exactly the right word. Indigenous stories get used a lot in TV, and
Hmm.
that's not a bad thing at all. We need to be part of the discourse. We need to be part of um, just general culture because if we're not, it's easy to erase us, and well, people are trying.
Well,
But
history as a whole is being erased and
also true.
rewritten. I mean, it's very much Orwellian 1984.
Yes, and we are currently poised at a crossroads where we're going to see some big changes one way or another. I'm
Yeah,
not
we
as
are.
deep into astrology as some other people are. I'm told that we are staring down the barrel of something big in that realm. Again, I'm not as into that as I am certain other things, but I can certainly believe it. um,
Yeah, definitely facing the crossroads for some changes. Um, Tanya from the Language of Our Destiny says a soul calling helps to release our desire to learn. Learning is dynamic and healing. And Ravi says failing is how you learn as well. Never be afraid to fail. Sorry, I got different glasses on, not seeing the computer screen stayed on. So a lot of positive people relating to what you're saying here.
it's something. it's something I think anyone in marginalized communities uh, feels like, recognizing that it. I just had another conversation with someone earlier today that, oh, well, I'm not political. And I told him that's fine. I don't have that luxury because I'm native. I'm not straight. I'm straight passing, but I'm not straight. Um, and like, it's anytime you're out in the world, you definitely feel like you're representative. Your failures are going to be counted not just against you, but against your entire community. And that doesn't actually, even going so far as to say, that doesn't just fall upon marginalized shoulders right now. Um, that will fall on other shoulders as well. But the marginalized, the marginalized will feel the effects a lot more and a lot more presently, generally speaking,
Hmm.
in the current power dynamics. Absolutely true, Ravy Ray.
Yeah.
We're not all the same. Not all tribes were the same. Not all people are the same. Not all families are the same. Everybody is really just responsible at the end of the day for ourselves. But you can definitely see where if you make a mistake or you get someone hurt, you can um, have that play out against more than just you. Um, and that's kind of the sad reality of life as we currently live. That if, and this is where I was saying, like, marginalized communities feel it harder. Um, if I were to go out and commit an act of great violence, the media would pick up that I am, a member of the indigenous community. Uh, it would pick up that I am not a Christian, and it would go from there. And that any retribution wouldn't just fall on my shoulders, it would fall on members of those communities. Um,
And that would be the
and
first thing they would mention.
oh,
I
100%.
mean, the first thing that they're going to dial
Mhm.
into is an indigenous person had a
Oh, yes.
whatever weapon,
Uh, mhm.
you know.
Um, oh, yeah, no, it would be bad. It would be bad. It would be bad quick. There would be probably retributive violence, but
Hmm.
um,
Oh,
like,
for sure there would be, because that would stem, and then you've got your people who fly off the handle that are now going to go off after any indigenous person.
mhm. And you're gonna see, like, you can see this even just in the horror community. I used to. I worked haunted houses for the last 15 years. I skipped last season, but I'm going back this season. And um, the first thing that happened anytime a haunter was on the news was they worked for such and such haunted house. It didn't matter if it happened January, August, July, June, whenever, way off season. First
Hmm.
thing that gets mentioned is they are a member of this, non-traditional community. And suddenly the haunted house has a bunch more uh has a bunch of PR messes it needs to clean up, or maybe it doesn't open that year. Um
Hmm.
and
I had
it's
not thought about that, but that's right on. I mean,
it's it's easy to say, oh, it's because we're so divided, everybody's ready to go off hacked cocked, because we are. Um and ultimately the only way that you manage to kind of fix that is to have conversations. It's the death of ignorance is experience. But we also live in a world where, it shouldn't be where it is kind of incumbent on the marginalized to educate the oppressor. And this is a lot of very lefty language. I apologize, but
That's
still,
okay.
uh, like it shouldn't be, but in the reality, it is. That's part of what I was saying before. That you always have to be. It feels like you always have to be representative because um, last Thanksgiving I had plans. They fell through. I was away from family. I was all alone in California, and my roommates, very sweet people. I had just moved in with them. They invited me to join their family at Thanksgiving, which I accepted because I didn't want to be alone. So I went with them, and what I didn't know was that they were from a family of wealthy white lawyers in Orange County, and being the native guy in a
Oh,
family of real estate attorneys in Orange County was an interesting day. And I had a lot of conversations. It was very good. It was very, uh, I made more friends. And there was only one family member that was, and it was the uncle again, but we ignore that one. Um, but they flat out told me that we had no idea this was happening. We've never had a chance to talk with an indigenous person before. Not the words they used, but that was the meaning. And sometimes you do have to look past someone not knowing the right lingo, or worst case scenario, someone knowing the right lingo and using it to hide much worse things. Um, and it was ultimately a very good experience. I was exhausted because I
oh, I'm
spent the
sure.
entire time uh, basically telling them that no, this is not just pointless Indians whining. This is a
Oh,
real, sincere problem. Well, why don't they just leave? Oh, because reservations are literally third world nations. Well, why are they like that? If it's so bad there, why doesn't everybody just move? Well, because you've got to get past the next nearest town, because usually they've heard for generations about how soft and easy the Indians have it because they can just complain to the government for everything. And well, doing that alone means leaving your community, leaving everything behind, and it's but having that conversation, very important, very necessary, and not everybody has the energy for it, certainly not all day every day.
no,
um
no.
and one thing I have is an enormous amount of patience. I grew up very rural. I spent years alone, uh as one of the only non-white people in a town that was 95% white. And um, yes, exactly. Language of your destiny. It doesn't matter what your marginalization is, how your community is weird. If it is at all not normal, that's gonna get hit first. That's what's gonna get talked about first, and that's what's gonna, you know, have that's what's gonna get the retribution first. Ultimately,
Hmm.
the biggest target, and a community is a very wide target. Um,
And
but
easily hit upon,
mhm,
and easily hit upon because of the ignorance, if you will, chosen or otherwise. Because
chosen ignorance is worse
some
than
of it is,
anything.
yes, some of it is chosen, and to use certain groups that are chosen, and the indigenous group has been, like you said, in the industries. We were talking about that the other night. We were watching, my husband and I were watching some show, and it was like, oh my God, what a stereotypical part.
Hmm.
I mean, it's just in 2024.
It's a
I would expect higher, better things out of people.
there have been great strides. There's always you're always going to meet assholes.
That's true. That's
You're
true.
always going to have people who don't care. You're always going to, by the same token, you will always have people who care. Um, yep,
Or it doesn't affect it. And I'm not saying me, but the excuse, it doesn't affect my life. So why should I care? Why should I get involved? Why should I, why should I even bother? We have all kinds of people hopping on. Hello, everyone. My son and I are paranormal investigators. Saw your live. Hi. Um, Good for you. Good for you.
absolutely.
Fake. Let's get the fake shit off of anything, not just paranormal.
Oh,
Widely
no,
across
100%.
the board.
Um, on that same topic, like I was saying, you were always going to find assholes in everything. And in the paranormal community, you're going to find people who want to fake shit because they want attention. They want the clicks. They want this. They want that. And people don't think about the long term impact of their actions. They don't think about how it affects not just what happens next, but how what can come from that. Because we're human, we make mistakes, and we
Mm-hmm.
can't always be thinking 9 steps ahead. That's mentally exhausting. Um, but you see this a lot in things that have native consultants. Um, because you'll have people who don't know. And in the past, you had a lot of people who didn't care because they needed a paycheck because they have to pay their rent, and that's a fact of life in the current system that you have to be able to pay your rent. So if you can fake being a native person, it used to be. It's been much better lately.
Mm-hmm.
But if you could fake being a native person and just, make up a bunch of shit, that happened, and we're still fighting the effects of it. And it's the same thing in the paranormal community, where the more you fake something, the more ammunition you have for somebody to point and say, "Oh, see, that was faked. It's all fake." Um, and
And that's how people see it.
mhm,
Absolutely. They generalize, especially for those people who fall on the outskirts of that community or don't respect or understand that community to begin with.
absolutely. You see it a lot on more mainstream paranormal shows of things that practices that shouldn't be encouraged. I'm not going to name names.
Oh, you
I'm
can
sure
name him
John.
Zach Bagans.
Well, yes. I'm sorry, but you kick in my door and scream at me. I'm gonna get mad too. Like, I'm sorry. What do you expect?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I'm proud to say the groups that we associate with and my group, we don't come in yelling.
um,
We come in and we're respectful until it's something demonic, and then that's another whole thing. But we don't challenge and throw up our hands and do the oh my god, what was that?
um,
I'm having tachycardia. No,
you don't have to hate a lion to recognize it's trying to eat you.
that's right. That's right.
You do have to recognize it's trying to eat you, so you got to deal with that, like
And put the
one way or
slow
another.
people up front. No, just kidding.
You kick somebody's knee out from under them. Like,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
go
that
ahead and
always works.
evenly.
Go for the kneecaps. Go for the kneecaps.
Uh, but
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
uh, when that happens, you do have to call out the fakes. You have to call out
Yes, you do.
uh, the problems, and it's one of the problems of community, recognizing when there are problem elements and having to self police. Because if you don't self police, well, somebody else is going to come in and do it for you. Uh, like you've any any fakery, any
Bullshit.
problems, any bullshit is going to get more problems down the road, and it's not just going to fall
Sure it
on
is.
your head. Um, It's going to hit the community one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
Same is true in the TTRPG space. Same is true in almost every space you can name. Just because if it's weird, actually, I don't want to use that word right now. If it's non-traditional, it's gonna like even not the use of the word as it was just used, but um, uh, even something as relatively tame as sub and dom, the BDSM space, anything you do there, it's gonna get visited upon the community. It's always gonna come back. It's not just gonna hit you, and it's gonna.
Oh, I have seen that so many times just on Facebook alone. I mean, holy crap, the repercussions over someone posting something in the sub and dom community using one word off just to generalize for people who do not know the difference brings upon a tsunami
It's one
that
of the
hits the whole
reasons
community.
representation is so important. Like, uh, 50 Shades of Grey is probably the single most damaging thing to the BDSM community that has ever existed. Um, Twilight, which is related to 50 Shades of Grey, is one of the worst things to ever hit the native community. Not the worst, but it is a bad thing. It is something that most native men have had to have dealt with a connection to. Now, granted, again, it's Twilight, not the Trail of Tears, but still. Uh,
But have you ever been asked, do you change into a wolf?
no, but I have had teenage girls run up, take my picture, run away giggling. If somebody
Oh
calls me,
no.
has to call me by a name. It used to be Tonto, now it's Jacob. So you know, well, when they use a name that's not mine and also not a slur.
Oh,
But
shoot.
uh, I've also, then again, I've also gotten work because I looked like Jacob, and like, I don't look like Jacob in any capacity. As I understand in the books, he's like 7 feet tall. I'm not. Like, I am teeny tiny. I'm, 5.5 feet tall at most on a good day when I'm standing on my tippy toes. Um, but uh, like, yeah, and don't get me wrong, Taylor Lautner, attractive man. I like to think I'm an attractive man. Don't look like Taylor Lautner. I keep my shirt on for a reason. Like,
Yeah, they
um,
actually said in the filming of that they got tired of taking their shirts off. It's like, can we just put a fucking shirt on, people?
well, no, you can't because we have to fetishize the sexy brown people. Um, like, um, uh, something else that has only a tangential connection there is, um, it, so many things contribute to this, and it's things you don't expect or think about until you sit down and really do kind of examine. Like, um, people are always like, "Oh, what's your hot take?" And my hot take is that Ancient Aliens is racist. Um, because you never see them go on and talk about how, oh, Stonehenge, we don't know how it happened, it must be aliens. Actually, I don't know, maybe they do, but you see it a lot with the pyramids. With there's definitely a balance in melanin about, well, we don't know how this happened, so it must be aliens.
Hmm.
God forbid the ancient druids totally knew how to erect Stonehenge, but the ancient Egyptians didn't know how to pile up bricks in a certain order. Um,
Fair enough. Yeah. But again, that's scripted media to get people to have a specific belief system, much like our schools that have rewritten history and, you know. The textbooks don't even have the right beginning of civilization, and they're not going to change those dates.
Nope, not
You're not going
currently.
to see a republished. You're not going to go back if you're Christian, and I'm going to offend people out here, but and that's what I'm here to do too. Is if you go all the way back, the Bible that's in print isn't even the original Bible. Oh my gosh, all those books have been removed. They're locked away someplace, like nothing is as what it seems, and nobody's putting out truth.
It's truth is also, we talk about objective truth. Objective truth is kind of only a concept.
Yep.
There's Subjective truth is much easier to achieve, but also perception is everything, context is everything. Nothing exists in a vacuum. Um, and you kind of just got to do your best sometimes. Uh, like One of the things that we talk about with the world being so divided is, oh, well, we've all just got to come together. And technically, sure, but also we can't act like that's easy, fair, or actually going to fix the problems. Um, it's not like all of this popped into existence. We are currently sitting where we are because of what's come before. One thing I love hearing is, why are Indians so mad about things that happened 200 years ago? And it didn't stop happening 200 years ago. Uh, we have been dealing with things as recently as, yesterday in a lot of cases. And that's just on personal levels. Like, you have people who, with family members who just kind of disappear. Like, every person I know, for longer than a couple of days, I always ask, like, if you see me getting in the back of a cop car, make sure there's video of it, because I need you to at least have video of me getting into the back of a cop car, because there are a lot of times that natives get in the back of cop cars and then they just vanish and there's no record of them ever being in that cop car. And, oh, are you sure you didn't just get drunk and wander off? You know how you engines are sometimes.
Oh boy.
And
And the indigenous population is one that has one of the highest
mhm,
sex trafficking and
mhm,
abusal, what is domestic violence,
mhm.
disappearing type of abuse
Oh,
as any
100%.
as any culture, and a lot of people aren't aware of that. It's a huge thing.
You also have situations where it's like, okay, speaking on a broader context again, that, okay, let's ignore the fact that indigenous people go missing so often, that, you know, every indigenous woman I've ever met has a story about, I don't want to say story, has had an experience about when someone tried or succeeded in harassing them. It's Let's speak in just a broader context. Oh, it's been 200 years. It hasn't been 200 years since systemic abuse happened. We're not talking about something that ended 200 years ago. We're talking about the fact that the last residential school in the continent closed in 1998. Within my lifetime, uh, 1998. And that's, when you understand what happened in the residential schools, that's not something we want to remember, but it is important. Um, you also have much deeper issues that you like. I started talking a little bit ago about Native American stories that get used for film and television, and like I said, that's a good thing. You need that, but you also almost always have important things left on the cutting room floor. Like, uh there's a story about a cannibalistic spirit that has been used time and time again, like just a couple of years ago with Guillermo del Toro. um and one of the things that's never really said, like you've got a movie adaptation coming out of Until Dawn, which had this same spirit, not used in a respectful or culturally appropriative or a culturally appropriate, definitely culturally appropriative um, aspect, uh, and it's not gonna be fixed. But this spirit, one of the most important things about it is you're not supposed to say its name. Um, and that's a part that doesn't get included because, oh, well, how can we write about it if we don't say its
Don't say
name?
its name.
You don't say its name. And there's actually a movie that was done by an independent film studio with a largely indigenous crew called Don't Say Its Name, which is actually really good, that came out around the same time. Um, Another one is from the southwestern area of the United States. A native. It's a native medicine person that absolutely not supposed to say that name. It draws its attention. There are aunties and grandmother who will backhand you for, thinking about it, because these aren't just stories. They
No,
are real belief structures that are still in place. They are real belief structures with adherents that have a lot of other issues that we shouldn't be, including this, infantilizing it, making it, you know, worsening the erasure. Uh, Instead, we do all that because, well, it's just Indians. It's fine. It's just silly Indian stories, right? Um, and, you know, a lot of there's a lot of problems that come about because the older generation didn't. So my grandfather's generation didn't talk about this because they were just happy to get through the day. They were just happy to
mhm,
exist at the end of the day.
right.
And my mother's generation started saying more and more, and that's when you started seeing a lot more disappearances. And now my generation, we're finally able to talk about it with some expectation of safety. Uh, and, this is another case where I could get things wrong and I would face backlash in my own community. Um, and eh, I'm okay with that. But exactly, there's no respect. And it's not even just that folk don't believe, it's just there's no respect. There's no respect for other belief systems. There's no respect for especially non-traditional belief systems. Like, we want to talk about marginalization. Any non-Christian perspective in America faces some
Whoa.
degree of marginalization.
Absolutely.
The Native
Absolutely.
American community is just one aspect, and it's the one I'm most comfortable talking about because that's my experience.
Hmm.
Um, and
Well, and
like,
the broad assumptions that come in with that, because,
yes,
you know, Native Americans worship the earth. Really, I'm sure they
absolutely.
have a whole different beliefs. I mean, the individuals, everybody's an individual, first of all. So they worship and have their own belief systems. And then you have the family unit, which has its own belief system. And then you have the culture, which may or may not have, depending upon the community and the size of the community, its own culture and its own spiritual path. And just because you're not Christian doesn't believe you don't believe in a God. And just because you believe in a God doesn't make you Christian. And there's so many ins and outs with all of the different things that people don't stop and think about the different. It's all about me.
That is 100% accurate. That especially in modern American culture, um, we don't we don't think beyond ourselves. We
Mm.
don't, like I was saying earlier, we don't think about long term impact. We have shallow, very, what am I trying to say? Very, we don't think beyond the moment. We don't think long term. That's both true for ourselves and as a society. Um, like it's very stereotypical, but you hear about a lot of native communities talking about 7 generations, and um, I don't think my tribe expressed it this way even. And I know I didn't say it before. Descended from Apsalaga and also Cree, but I don't know anyone from that side of my family, and I only found that through doing a family tree. So I say it because it's what I've found, but it's not something I can actually claim. Um, the Cree side, uh, but nothing but snow natives, as I like to say. Um,
Snow natives.
exactly, language of your destiny. Anything beyond a white picket fence is kind of too hard to process. It's not really my experience. It's not what I want, and mm, it's uh so something we've kind of something that is not present in modern American broader culture is that sense of community. Um, like it's something you see a lot in Native American communities is a stronger sense of community. And this is like, oh, well, I just said in a Native American community is a sense of community, but um, yes, thank you, Ravi. That there's not really an expectation in America that you have that sense of community. That's part of why we do have such a problem with nationalism, in my opinion. I am one person, I am a Logan speaking for a Logan. Um, is that we don't have an expectation of being part of that community. So we are naturally inclined to join groups because we're kind of pack animals. We're very good at bonding. Uh, like you don't have to spend more than a few days around somebody before you can see them casually stroking their car like it's a pet, or a favorite piece of furniture, talking about it. We do that because it's our natural instinct. We like things. We like being around things. If we can attach any kind of a personality to it, we're going to, because it's what we do. It's how we survive. We are pack animals. We are social creatures. And when we don't have those smaller communities, um, generally speaking, Ravi Rave, a lot of it is pretty similar. It's don't be a dick, don't kill people, uh, avoid rape, be nice to kids, most of which are still covered under don't be a dick. Um, but people have died over the finer details of that from time immemorial. And um, I'm not sitting here saying that, oh, well, it doesn't go beyond like, my culture, my community. I am just exactly, they're just wording it differently.
Hmm.
Um,
Agreed.
but it's the one I can speak for because it's my experience.
Right, right.
um, and I it's the kind of thing like when Black Lives Matter happened, you saw a lot of this with people saying, "Oh, so other lives don't matter, white lives don't matter," which was not the point. Um, Black Lives Matter because white lives mattering is not in doubt. There was also a little bit of a push at the time for Red Lives Matter, but that was kind of decided we can't muddy the water too much because you know we're going to take the air out of the room, and that's kind of There was already enough discourse because God forbid we try to um God forbid we try to stop more people from dying at once. It's too confusing. Uh, but
How would you know which side to be on?
exactly.
I mean, that's really that.
The
Now you
hashtags
get
alone would,
right.
drown out everything else. Because that's the world we live in. We live in a world of hashtags, sound bites, small pieces of information, but a lot of it is just saying the same thing. Don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Like, I think of it in terms that there are essentially three groups in the world. And the numbers vary wildly. Source is 100% trust me, bro. But generally speaking, you got Group A, who actively doesn't want to hurt anybody. You don't want to go out of your way to cause pain because nobody wants to put on pants at the end of the day. Group A just wants to get by and they will go out of their way to hurt someone, to not hurt someone until it becomes absolutely necessary for their own survival. Then you
Right.
got Group B who doesn't care. And Group A is by far like the biggest group. It's 80 to 90% of the world, maybe more.
Leave me
Um,
alone and I'll leave you alone.
uh-huh. And Group B is much smaller. Again, we're talking like 15 to, you know, even like 8%. So Group B doesn't care. They'll hurt you if you're in their way, but not what they plan to do, but they don't care about doing it. They'll
Hmm.
do it if, you know, they gotta, quote unquote. Um, And Group C, which is the remaining 2 to 5%, teeny tiny, very small, very minimal, minuscule, statistically zero, but still extant, who actively does want to hurt people, who 100% wakes up every morning and says, I'm going to fuck up someone's day, who wakes up and says, I want to hurt someone.
Hmm.
And we're all worried about Group C because we have to. They are a real element in society, but they are so small. Um, like I think about this a lot. If you see a small child who has been separated from their parent in a store, most people, like 8, 9 out of 10, never gonna hurt that child. Gonna do what they can to connect that child to their parents.
That's true.
But
Or videotape it. I mean, there's but yeah.
people who are gonna do something to help as
Right.
best they can. Um, but we got to be careful because there's the few people in the world who are going to hurt that kid, who are going to do something. And I use the example of a kid just because it is so universal. It is one of the that's still Group A,
It is so
Ravi Rig.
goofy. Mhm.
It Group B doesn't have to get pushed. If you are literally just kind of in their way between what they want,
Mhm.
um, yeah, whatever. Group A has to be pushed. Group B doesn't.
Yeah.
Um, and there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to. I'm not saying, oh, it's, anything like that. It's not so. It is just a case of people who don't want to hurt people until they have to versus people who don't care about hurting people.
Mhm.
Um, but generally speaking, you have to understand that most people don't want to hurt anyone. And if you come at it from that perspective, it's a little easier to talk and have these conversations. But not everybody can. Not everybody has the energy. Not everybody, because like you see this in a lot of queer communities where a lot of people are just trying to survive in situations where it's not a given. Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of people in the world who do care. And, you know, um, Mr. Rogers had a saying that I'm very fond of remembering. When something goes wrong, look for the helpers. Because there will always be helpers. There have to be. Uh, Generally speaking, humans are pack animals, and we do care. We
That's true.
want to bond. We want to meet people like us. We want to be around people like us, around people we like, around people who like us. And saying, "Oh, well, we want to be around people like us." Well, that's really easily co-opted by any number of, bad faith elements. Also very important. Because you are going to make mistakes. And so long as you're willing to accept that, own up to it, and do better,
That's
it
true.
it should be that simple.
And
Um,
Maslow says we have to have each other. I
mhm,
mean, his hierarchy of needs, the most basic thing besides food, water, and shelter is community. It's other people.
mhm.
Being alone is a complete violation of the hierarchy of human needs. You don't get very far when you're winging it by yourself.
And with also, when you're alone is when you're at your most vulnerable. It's when you're at your weakest. If you don't have a community, you don't
Mm-hmm.
have a support network, you don't have a support structure, you can be targeted, you can be radicalized, you can be you can be murdered by your own demons. People
It's
are
very
annoying,
true. People are very annoying.
but even people who are the most misandrous typically have people that annoy them less, people they've found that they care about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, People who care about them. And, you know, America has a big Christian population because for the longest time, it's not even the religion that people actually really loved, in my opinion. It's that sense of community. It's
Yes.
because churches help. Local churches will take care of their parishioners sometimes. Depends on the church.
Well, and it was community. It was community gatherings. It was celebrations.
Hmm.
It was end of life celebrations. It was potluck dinners. It was having the minister over on Sunday in the fellowship of everybody eating together. It was
All the big life
community.
events
Yeah.
were usually marked by an ceremony at the church. At a birth, you usually had like a christening or a baptism. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
not usually, but or at the very least, you'd have the pastor say, "And Bob and Martha just gave birth to a beautiful baby," um, or you know, and then on your 16th birthday, depending on your religion, you might have a certain ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or even just you'd have a rite of passage ceremony, a coming of age ceremony.
Sure.
Um, you'd celebrate so many aspects of your life in the church, and I think a
Church.
lot of people are missing that more than
And even
anything.
Wednesday dinners. I mean, for real, a lot of them just the socialization, the potluck dinners where everybody brings a casserole or whatever, and you sit around as a community and you do those things. That
You share a
togetherness
meal,
is right.
and
Exactly.
um, it's something that so that's something I do think that people are missing a lot of in the modern era, that sense of community. Um, and you could absolutely get it from church, but you can get it from so many other communities. Like,
Hmm.
um, growing up, it wasn't church where my family had those kind of friends or those kind of events. It was their gaming group. It was their Vampire the Masquerade group because they had five adults who got together every week. And when somebody was getting married or had a baby, that's the group that would come together. Or they'd come together with like the other members of the LARPing community, which wasn't the tabletop group, but was related. And they would still like come together because they still had like interconnected friendships and whatnot.
Oh, sure.
Um, and that's growing up, like that was the closest thing I had to church. And I look back on those with such fondness. Or for my biological father, uh, he had his group of comedians because he was a stand-up comic. And I I remember those get-togethers where he would get that group of friends together to celebrate, a big gig or his latest wedding. I think the man was married 13 fucking times. I have more
Lots of
has to
family
them
and
than I can
friends.
count. Um, but he's still alive. Just he's finally like stuck in one because he's no longer able to go out and get more. Um,
The,
so
the
he's
need for
finally like
socialization.
exactly, and we. I have never felt more alone um, than I did when I was living in California without any kind of community. There were my roommates, who again were very sweet people,
Hmm.
but I spent most nights like I would literally go to the grocery store, get a handle of cinnamon whiskey, and it'd be gone in 2 days just because I was alone and I felt it. And it wasn't until I moved and I started becoming a part of a broader community again that I stopped feeling like suicide. Just because
Hmm.
without community, you start to crumble at the edges.
Hmm.
Um, Very famous saying, no man is an island unto himself. And you ever doubt that, go be alone.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and the recordings, the track loops, I call them, in your head that start playing when you're alone, that you don't have when you have other people around you. And
Mhm.
none of us have to have somebody around us 24/7, but
No.
you have to have that connection with that group, or like you said before, we're our own demons. The source of some of our own issues is our internal thinking, and we create or replay the negative scenarios in our head over and over again, and it becomes very oppressive, depressive, suicidal, depending on that aspect, for sure.
And just to bring it back to the kind of like this is a paranormal podcast, like when you're dealing with supernatural entities, if you have those feelings, they're gonna know and they're gonna use them
Absolutely.
like straight
Absolutely.
up just because um
I watched an anime last night, and to me it was the most spot on thing, and I said, "Wow, sometimes it takes a simple little cartoon show. They're not simple. I'm oversimplifying and being dramatic. But the first thing they said was, the thought processes of human beings creates the demonic activity. We bring out the negative with our own negative thinking. Negative obviously attracts negative. Therefore, you begin the curse process or the demonic process for yourself by thinking negatively and living in that negative
mhm.
pit." And I thought, how simply stated, but yet how true it is.
And it's um it's the kind of thing that this is where we get the origin of the term toxic positivity, because it's easy to say, oh well, just think positive and then it can't hit you. And like you ever been in the middle of a depression loop and decided to think positively
No,
because it's it's momentum that you can't
no.
it's momentum that you're working against, and especially if you've got an outside force adding on, like you've got your own demons, your own loop, your own emotions pushing down on you, and then you have something uh devouring it. Well,
Suicide. I mean,
if
it's
eventually.
or those ideations that come, and it's the same thing with medicine. That's why we have to be so watchful of people when they start on an antidepressant and on medicines like that, is because finally they have enough momentum, energy, whatever word we choose to use for it, and then people are like, oh, positive, happy, happy, joy. and you're on that wheel and it's spinning fast, and that's when you're most vulnerable for that thought to pop in and go, you know what, I'm tired of this. I could just end it all, and that's it.
And it, suicide is still so taboo because it is so painful to who's left behind.
Yes.
Um, but it's something like we still have an inherent idea of it being, and I'm talking societally. We have this inherent idea that it's weakness, that suicide happens, and I read something. Um,
Hi, Damien.
I read something many years ago that is kind of stuck with me. That suicide isn't weakness. Suicide happens when exactly. Real magic does not work that simply. But suicide happens when pain overcomes our resources for coping with pain. It's as natural as water overfilling a cup. Like at a certain
Yep.
point, you can't. You're human. You have limits. And it's 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 not that you can't expect to go beyond them, but it's you can't hold it against somebody for fighting as hard as they can and just not having anything left.
Right.
Um, I shouldn't say you can't hold it against something. Your emotions are valid, especially that hurt, that betrayal, if you've gone through it. But you have to remember, ultimately, I'm just saying it's not a matter of weakness. It's a matter of physics. It's a
Sure.
matter of willpower is not endless. Willpower is a resource we spend. It's not a innate characteristic or a character trait. It's something you can absolutely empty out. And when you hit the bottom, in the most in the best stories, when you hit the end, when you hit the bottom, you can find incredible strength underneath and you can go beyond and accomplish miracles and do something truly magical, truly superhuman. But a lot of times you can't. You don't hit that magic wellspring that's under there just because something happens too hard, too fast, too suddenly, it's too much all at once, or just that there's a reason those are not the normal story. Those are the reasons they're the aspirational, the inspirational, because they are not the norm. And
No,
like
that's beautifully said. That's
when we
beautifully
talk
said
about,
because
oh no, please.
no, it's just, we people are so quick to judge, and I'm speaking in generalities as well. People are so quick to judge that person who has hit that bottom and has nothing left. And yet, sometimes it's not that they themselves have hit bottom, but they know that their family has hit bottom, and they know what's coming is, to die with dignity and respect is a huge thing. And everybody
100%.
has the right to pass with dignity in a way that they choose to go, and not be left incapacitated if that is not their choosing.
And
And so that's not that you checked out early because you gave zero fucks or you were too weak. It's, I'm a human and I choose to pass on my conditions, on my terms, and not be eaten by a disease or go through this horrific experience with my family where I don't even know who they are.
I'm sorry for that language of your destiny. And
Mm.
that's beautiful, Ravi Rave. Um, and there have been times that I've literally just kept going because, no, fuck you. Spite is a powerful motivator.
Yeah, it
Like,
can be for some of us.
mm-hmm.
Tanya,
Um,
love you.
I literally started this career because at one point someone in the industry looked at my spouse at the time and said, "Why are you with Logan? He's not smart. He's not anything. And writing is the easiest thing in the world. If he's never done something with it by now, he never will." And like I'd spent years and years as a house husband at that point, and yeah,
Hmm.
no, that level of spite really just pushed me to actually get something done. So in a weird way, he actually really helped, but there was a good 6 month period where I didn't do anything. I got rid of every book associated with that IP. Um, and it took a while to get to a point where I could hit fuck it, but I did. And like it was kind of a very magical experience in that. So my perspective on magic is pretty maybe not simple, but when it comes to magic, there's usually when it comes to magic and the supernatural, there's usually an explanation, a reasonable or a skeptical explanation for most things. But why? Um, the example I love to use is if you cast a money spell, you're supposed to do a bunch of activities that will bring money with it.
Hmm.
You're supposed to go out and do more jobs. And somebody of a skeptical mindset is going to say, well, of course you got that job. You started applying a bunch more. Of course it happens. Um, or you have someone saying, who said you have, like, I'm going to use Avatar the Last Airbender here. You have a fortune teller tell you you're going to meet your true love if you wear red shoes. Yeah, I'm going to go out and buy a pair of red shoes because that sounds really nice. And somebody's going to say, well, of course, if you never take them off, that's going to happen. And honestly, it doesn't matter. All life is based around ceremony. All human experience is based around rituals, and it doesn't matter whether there's a supernatural explanation for it or not. It doesn't matter if, the law of statistics coming in, or the law of whether it's the law of statistics or the law of attraction. If it works, it works. And I choose to believe in magic because I think life is more fun with magic.
Yes.
Um, there's also an element, someone once told me that magic is the domain of the oppressed, because when you have nothing but hope, does it matter what keeps you going, whether it's religion, a spell, or so long as it gives you the idea that you do have control of your life and you do have some way to affect change in the world.
Doesn't matter.
Exactly. Maybe the only thing that connects you to that wellspring of power, that aspirational story that makes you into the inspirational tale that will tell people, is you did a spell at the right time and it gave you the strength to carry on and do something amazing. And that is a certain kind of magic all on its own.
Sure it is.
Um,
Sure it is. And some people would call that a miracle, and some people would call that, there's a lot of terms for that, but absolutely. The tongues in your shoes, not the tongues in your mouth, is how to move in a fabulous way. I love that.
I mean, endless possibilities sound pretty fun to me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I would love endless possibilities.
Hmm.
And I think there are endless possibilities.
Hmm.
But I think people who are advocates, and we need to keep talking. We need to keep educating. We need to have, here's that P word, patience. You know, we need to engage people in those topics and let people know what's out there, and the difference between what you read in the media and what you hear in the media and what's really going on are oftentimes very different things.
And it's the same, um, like, the same is true. when you're dealing with supernatural entities as well, um, we have a lot of different words for them. We have a lot of different, explanations for them. But we also, every explanation for a supernatural entity usually comes with a recommended method of dealing with it as well, no matter the perspective. And um, I resort back to, if it works, it works.
Right. Right.
Um, and you got to figure out the way to harness your own magic. A lot of what I do is just telling stories. Um, Coyote and Crow, just to take this back to where it all started with
Hmm.
TTRPG, is so important because it's literally a game about not just native futurism, but it's the expression of it happens from me, a native person, to usually tables of non-native people who want to come and learn. They want to come experience. They want to come and have this story in a native world told by a native storyteller. And they usually want to be educated and they want to experience and understand. And that too is magic.
Yes, it is.
That's literally rewriting reality, changing minds just by talking. And at the end of the day, that's kind of what it's all about. We're here to talk. We're here to experience. We're here, and so much of our reality is based on society, our interactions, and that's based on in communication, talking, stories. And I think if I ultimately had to say, what is the most powerful magic I possess, I would probably say it's the power of stories. Stories move mountains. We have trains and tunnels through mountains literally because somebody once said, I have an idea. Let me tell you how we can make it happen. And
Yeah.
thus it was done. There's a story in the Bible, which is literally called the greatest story ever told. I said that very uh, dismissively, but and people have literally been killing each other over that for 2,000 plus years. Like, as Ravi was saying earlier, we've been
Good night,
we've been
Damien.
arguing over the wording of that story. Love is pretty magical. Love is, it's very cheesy. The power of love is, but love is one of the most powerful forces in the world. And,
It's life changing.
mhm. And a lot of
It's
times we get through the day by telling ourselves about how we're going to go find love or what we're going to do for love, getting out of bed and going to work because killing yourself means your kids are going to starve or get put in the foster care system is love.
yes, it is.
And
I said that at the same time Tanya said that. I said, yes, it is, and she typed it. Magic, huh? I thought it, and
synchronicity.
you typed it. That was good.
Um, we sometimes, when you're at your darkest moments, you're facing down your demons, the demons of society. All you have is the power to tell yourself a story about how it's going to get better. And it doesn't have to be much. Sometimes it's just, I will get through this.
Yep, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm gonna find it. May not be today, but I'm gonna
And
find it.
like, I've literally just been telling stories. And that's, I think that's where, like, Julie, you met me when I was selling makeup.
Yes.
Um, and whether I'm working as a salesperson or I'm working as a storyteller, it's all the same idea. It's all telling a story. It's all inviting you into my space and, just opening up. And even sitting right here, it's all just talking and explaining. Like, if I have a magic, it's definitely the power of stories.
Yes. Yes. Your power with words and the way you say things is definitely a strong point, and it's a drawing in point for people. It's a beckoning, it's a welcoming to that podium where the storyteller tells the story. And that's been going on since ancient times. You know, I mean
One of the
that's
most powerful mediums for uh, uh, de-escalation is literally letting someone talk at the podium. We're not all natural storytellers, but a lot of us like being heard.
this chat is not on pint
Not on point.
point. Oh, I was like, hmm. Well, don't know what to tell you. I happen to think it's very much on point because I'm my first of all, my talk show is metaphysics and not just paranormal. It's spiritual. It's a spiritual speakeasy where all spirits are served. And I really want to say that bringing groups of people together, bringing people of there are people on this podcast that are hitting me up personally saying how much they appreciated the connection that was made here. If you don't make connections with things that are not in your box, then you stay in your box. And we have to do a better job of stepping out of boxes and getting to know each other as human beings
I
and
would
sharing
100% agree.
stories.
Mhm.
You and I found a commonality right off the bat with Zach Bagans, which was fun. I mean, but it was a draw in for sure.
Mhm.
We both dislike Zach Bagans. And that was a laughing point. It was a starting point, and the conversation flowed and the stories flowed after that.
Mhm.
And so I think we all have to step out and do a better job of getting to know each other as human beings and understanding how we all tie into this planet together. Because if we don't tie in, we're going to lose the planet. We're going to lose each other.
Well, that is kind of the point that at the end of the day, we all need a community. We all need a little more understanding, and there's a lot of ways to get there. Mostly mine is stories. Mine is talking. Mine is meeting with people. Mine is a little bit of BS because it makes people laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And once you have people laughing, you have people listening.
Absolutely,
And
you do.
sure, you're never going to get everyone. You're not going to have people who always want to engage. And then you got to do it something else. But I think I do.
Yeah, I think you do too. I think you do too. So for
Um,
people, oh, go ahead.
oh no, after you, Julie.
No, I was just going to say for people who want to get a hold of you, for people who have questions for about the TTRPG or just even the cultural issues that they want to learn more about, how would they get a hold of you?
I can be reached at loganmbose@gmail.com. I've got an Instagram, Logan. I think it's just Logan Bose. I can be found, examples of my work and my portfolio can be found at loganbose.com/writing.
He
The
just
make
posted that. Russell just posted that in the comments for you.
Wonderful.
Good.
Um, You can also find the cosmetics site at phoenixrising.com. Um,
Is that the new
and
name?
that's the name of that company that I'm working with right now.
Okay.
And yeah, uh, also Coyote and Crow is not mine, but something I do a lot of work with. Um, and yeah, that is most of where I can be reached. I don't have a Twitter because I got off that hell site. Um,
It's
I
a
can be
mess.
I can be found on Facebook real easy. Logan M. Bose, which is mostly just personal, but yeah.
Very good. Where are you up to next? Where you flying to or driving to next?
So I think next is actual Crow Fair in Montana, and that one is literally just the tribal powwow that marks the Crow New Year. I'm going to take my it's the first time I'm actually going to take all of my children and manage to go do it.
Wow, that'll be an interesting time. They will love that. They will love that. And traveling with kids is always a joy.
One hopes.
Well, you can go either way. I laugh not because I never enjoyed traveling with my kids, but one of them traveled extremely well, and the other one threw up the whole way. I mean, you'd go 30 miles and the puking would start. So you just never. It was quite the family time in my household. I have to laugh because my kids are all grown now and they've got kids and now they're dealing with it too. So that's always the fun part when you've made it through that part.
Mm-hmm.
Well, wishing you luck and thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule and for opening this discussion. I think it was a marvelous discussion and I so appreciate you sharing your insights and you're a beautiful person. And I'm so blessed to have met you. I mean
Well,
that with all my heart.
thank you, Julie. I feel the same way about you.
It's just been a joy. And the links will be posted on Supernatural Inc. And you can go into our Facebook pages and check out the various links for everything. Thank you, everybody who tuned in. And I thank you, Logan. Good night.